What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a video about the games and announcements that I hope we see or at least get some news of via the upcoming Game Awards. So here in just a few days the Game Awards happens, and while it is an awards show, and I've already talked about the awards part of it, another huge aspect of that show is in fact all of the announcements and updates we get on a variety of different games, both in terms of release dates, world reveals, that kind of thing. And one could argue it's the primary reason people watch it, to be honest. And so, obviously, there are some games going into it that I'm hoping that we hear about, get some news on. Some of them are fairly obvious, some of them are a little more under the radar, I would say. But in either case, these are the ones that I personally would like to hear from the most. Kicking it off nice and simple with, of course, Fable. So, the Fable reboot has already seemingly gone through some problems of some sort, in the sense that it was announced to be coming a long time ago, and then just kind of disappeared for a while, and while still in the works. Outside of one pretty minimal trailer, there's really not much else to say about it, in terms of confirmed facts anyway, and so any news of life here would be good, especially since probably one of the more interesting things about this game as a whole is that while the Fable series is well loved, the primary three are very old and pretty easily, I would say, improved upon at this point. And because of that, I'd say the world is your oyster when it comes to rebooting that franchise and seeing what they actually want to do with it, and hopefully we just hear something here in just a few days on the 11th. However, in a, I would say, much different direction, something I personally would really love to see there is a release date for the Gothic Remake. So, pretty big fan of Gothic and Piranha Bytes' body of work before they got shut down, unfortunately. And while they made a lot of weird, janky little RPGs, probably none of them really have as much acclaim, if you will, as the original Gothic. It really was quite something back when it released. And a remake that reimagines those experiences and makes that altogether more playable, as the original game is quite old, requires mods to run really well, or at all in some cases. Combine that with the fact that we've got playable demos for this, which is likely the footage you're seeing for it on screen, and it's mostly looking pretty great. And the thing is, we've already got a release window of sometime in 2026, and so I think the Game Awards is probably the best place to put out a trailer with the actual release date and get people interested, because while I'm playing it either way, obviously they want more than just me in there. So seems like a good time for a release date at any rate. Speaking of release dates, another cool one that we would hopefully see there is Judas, the upcoming title being worked on by Ghost Story Games and Ken Levine. They've done the occasional preview here or there, so it's not like there hasn't been any word of this title, but it hasn't exactly been a wealth of information either. But from what they have shown off, some of the systems look particularly interesting, like one of the three sort of big characters can become a villain that you'll have to fight off, that kind of thing, and it just looks like it's doing some fun stuff if you liked, of course, games like BioShock and the like. However, it is still a game that ideally could use an actual release date at some point, but honestly I'd probably settle for a new trailer or whatever else they've got going on, but I imagine this one's pretty likely that we'll actually see it there. In a similar but definitely distinctly different vibe, we then have Clockwork Revolution, the title being worked on by In Exile Entertainment, which we also don't have a ton of information about. Last we really heard from this game, we got a trailer during the summer as part of the Xbox showcase, showing off some of its core RPG features, and while I don't think it's exceedingly likely that we'll see it here at the Game Awards, I honestly do think it would be nice to get some news about this, as it's another game where information is a little bit on the light side. So hopefully we hear more from it, because I'd like to just kind of get an even better idea of what exactly it is going to be in total, as there is only so much you can glean from these trailers after all. But speaking of more information, another game I'd love to hear more from is Zero Company, or Star Wars Zero Company to be specific, a TRPG in the Star Wars universe, of course. Basically think XCOM, but Star Wars. That was announced much earlier this year in April. Now, it was mentioned that this game is coming in 2026, but we really haven't seen or heard much from it since that initial announcement. Obviously, with a brand like Star Wars and just the nature of the project, giving it some proper marketing at the Game Awards with a potential release date, even if it's supposed to be coming in 2026, would not be unheard of, and honestly, I would just love to see more of this one. The idea of it is extremely interesting to me, and from what little bit they did show when they announced it, it does seem pretty promising. Speaking of promising, however, then we've got The Blood of Dawnwalker, another game slated for sometime in 2026 from Rebel Wolves, ex-CD Projekt Red devs, and you can tell because you can definitely feel The Witcher 3 all over this title, just from what they've shown off. However, while they have shown off quite a bit of Dawnwalker here, actually, what we don't know is obviously a release date, and naturally, the Game Awards is the perfect place to announce something like that, to get it in front of as many eyes as possible. And while I honestly don't think the time mechanic of this one is going to land with everyone, basically everything else about this game looks really cool, and I'm actually excited for this one. It's probably, I would say, one of my most anticipated for the next year. However, when next year would be great to hear. So hopefully news soon. And then finally, a showcase for Crimson Desert would be very nice. This is an upcoming title from Pearl Abyss that is due out in March of 2026, has a release date and everything, and I think it would just make sense to have its last big marketing push kick off with the Game Awards as they start to bring this thing towards release. But it looks to be an RPG doing a lot of different stuff, and I think the more deep dives and clarifications they could push into people's feeds so people understand what it is they're actually getting from this game would go a long way for it. But it does look pretty cool at any rate. And with that, that's basically the games I personally am the most interested in seeing at the Game Awards, but that's hardly an exhaustive list, and thus I'd love to hear what you guys are looking forward to seeing there. And to that end, you are certainly welcome to tell me down in the comment section below, which naturally means to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.